TNKR Media.
Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton today. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Any show that we get to talk about food is a good show for me, so I'm looking forward to speaking with Judith Fetzer of Cook It, another really great local business that's delivering fresh produce and cooking supplies to locals, and part of an industry that's certainly taken off during the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. It's, there's, like we've said many times before, you never want to let a good pandemic go to waste from a business perspective. So, there's a lot of really good opportunities and good ideas that have come out. And I think the challenge is going to be for a lot of people, and this is one of the things we'll talk to Judith about, is this, all of a sudden finding a lot of competition. So if those of you that have read Blue Ocean, Red Ocean, at one point, this was a blue ocean environment. It's going to eventually go red. And how do you move back to blue?
It is also important to maintain a good relationship with your bank, as we've said on the program many times, and we'll talk about that in the final segment with Patrick Sullivan, trustee at FL, on forbearance agreements and maintaining that link with your bank. So that's all on the way. But first, as usual, some news and notes, and this piece from HBR on the year of working from home and what it's done to our relationships at work. And I'd also note, Mike, on the remote working trend, that Google is actually pulling back a little bit in recent days, and they're signaling that they're going to want their people back in the office perhaps a little more often than some of us thought earlier.
Yeah, well, we've been through this discussion probably about 12 times in the last 12 months in terms of in, out, partially in, partially out. You go back to the environment that we're living in terms of the flexibility. Somebody said to me one day, when you were a kid and you played hockey, did you when you played in your backyard versus going to the arena, did you play differently? Well, I think for a lot of people, work is a similar environment. And I think the most important part really is the mental wellness component that's associated with it, the human interaction, the small chat around the water cooler, all of those things that we take for granted when we come to work and many days consider to be a real pet peeve are actually part of our shining and help our mental stability.
What about in terms of just productivity? Does it vary between people, between offices, between industries, or do you have a rule? Do you think that people are more productive at the office than they are at home?
I do think they're more productive at the office. I think there are certain people that shine in an environment like COVID, where they either get distracted or have a lot of different things pulling at them. Whereas at home they can focus more. Some people have that ability. Other people need to have people sitting near them and working and have an interactive environment in order to shine. Do I think overall productivity is down? Definitely. I don't think that it's necessarily great for the economy to have everybody sitting in their home office, and it brings a lot of other challenges. I think getting people back to work, I'm afraid for the first month, though, when everybody comes back to work, I'm not sure the productivity is going to be great once they come back and start socializing with one another. But yeah, eventually, I think what we're going to settle into is a hybrid environment.
And speaking of socializing, this story, also from HBR, about small talk and the importance of small talk, I would add, for creativity especially if you're in a creative endeavor, those water cooler breaks are actually pretty important.
Yeah, and a lot of inspiration is happened in an off-the-cuff conversation as opposed to a contrived, forced meeting environment on a Zoom video that, we want you to be creative at 10 o'clock when I call you on Zoom. It's a whole different environment. And I think what we're going to continue to see is there's no opportunism. And I think that's the hard part. I think when you're working at home, to say, hey, something comes to me, I think of it, I walk to the next person, I bounce it off you, we have a conversation. Now I have an idea, I got to set a meeting with you, I got to send you an email, I got to wait you for 2 hours to get back. So what we're getting is a very non-human creative environment by working remotely.
One thing I want to talk about is the technology Slack. Let's devote a minute to Slack, because I have had interesting conversations with clients, in some cases who have paid me a lot of money every month, and I still refuse to use their Slack. Am I a jerk? Is Slack the future? Is this the way to socialize? Because I just see it as a time waster.
So I'm going to ask you to explain for our audience what Slack is, because I bet you there's a lot of people out there that don't know.
It is a work communication platform. You can assign tasks. You can chat with your coworkers. Is that pretty much a decent recap?
Okay, so look, I mean, yeah, is that environment something that works? I mean, I think there's a lot of organizations that already have it in either some form of instant messaging or workflow, work production environment. You're talking to an older school mentality here, where I still much prefer to have the conversation than to be posting everything on a social media site. So I think there's room for both. Is it the future? I'm not even going to begin to guess what software is the future. I think it's also going to depend on what generation's in charge. I mean, the reality of where we go with a lot of these conversations, if you look at the evolution of social media usage within our organizations, as we have gone from the Gen Xers to the millennials, and now starting to see the Zoomers creep in, we're starting to see different software being used in different modes. So I don't think anything is for good for long anymore in the world we live in.
In my business, I preach a very minimalist attitude towards social media, and I just see Slack as another social media platform. And in that sense, I just see hours burning when people are spending too much time on Slack. But that's just me. I know there are people in the background here who are big Slack fans. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it can be used for collaboration. It could be used in a work environment as well. There's no doubt that it's like anything else, right? I mean, you can go back and say, well, the advent of the computer at one point killed our social interactions at the office. It's what you do with everything. It's not the fact that it exists and how it gets applied. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that want to argue with me on that front, but I think it's how things are applied and how they're optimized and not abused.
So lastly, just to wrap this topic up, I think it's important to strike a balance, right? Things I think we agree won't ever go back to the way they were. There always have to be some flexibility, some amount of remote work, especially for professionals. What does the future look like? I mean, are we going to give people the option to stay home on Fridays whenever they want, X number of days per month, just like sick days?
Look, we're going to end up in a hybrid environment. There's no doubt. Like I said, some people flourish working from home. Some people need the social interaction. We are going to have to come to some kind of grips as to what that's going to look like. We back in Fuller back in October, November, sat down with the team leaders, non-partners, because most of the partners are older, so they're not going to get that concept of remote work. But we sat down with the directors and the managers and the team leaders and said, come up with a work from home policy, but more on a hybrid model. We'd already had a work from home policy with certain restrictions that was, was, I guess, our first foray even before the pandemic shut us down. I can't see, like you said, Google moving back. If you go back to IBM's days where they sent everybody home, I mean, the ongoing analysis that was done on employees working from home from IBM was raising significant levels of mental health issues, isolation, and depression. So we have to find a way as an organization, but more importantly as a society, as to how to be using that and have to be open and flexible in those environments.
What does on a related note, the downtown real estate landscape look like to you in the coming months? We're seeing a lot of businesses, a lot of landlords giving away space downtown. Are you still seeing that exodus?
Well, I'm not sure I see an exodus because there's nobody downtown to see exiting. So it's, I look out my window from my office and it's still a little discouraging when we're still pretty much shut down in most of the downtown core. So it's going to take time. I think people are going to downsize some of their space. I do not think that we are ever going to be, completely working without office space downtown. I think we'll be putting more people or more full-time equivalent people, because that's the term really that we need to be looking at, is the full-time equivalency into workspace. I don't think the downtown office space is going to go away. There's a glut coming there, as there is in anything else. The question whether that glut was building prior to the shutdown, I guess the jury's still out on as well. There's only so much we can build and participate if we're not creating new business. So now we got to rejuvenate businesses. We've got to be able to get everything back open once we deal with the health side of things. And there's got to be an encouragement, and there's going to have to be a continued incentive to fill up office space. But I don't think office space is dead, if that's what you're asking me. It's certainly not going to be what it was 2 years ago, but it's not a dead environment.
We gave up our office probably about 6 years ago now, and I would say I never regret it up until recently. Like I think now I'm starting to feel that lack of in-person collaboration amongst my teammates, and especially after this year where we can hang out at a coffee shop. Now I'm starting to reconsider.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. You had the whole discussion of Google right at the beginning about Google wanting to see some of their people back. I think when the pendulum goes too far one way, there's a natural reaction for it start to swing back, and that's where I say we have to find that hybrid environment that is socially and economically and mentally healthy for people. But yeah, I can't see I can't see it going away, and we are going to need. People are funny enough. People are longing to come back to an office. Maybe not 5 days a week, but they're certainly longing to have some kind of permanent workspace out of their home.
And speaking of work from home, you can get lots delivered these days, including all your meals. Judith Fetzer is the founder and president of CookIt. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, Judith.
Thank you so much. I feel so privileged to be here today. So hi, Dan. Hi, Mike. And just for your listeners, I get to see what it actually looks like to build a radio show this morning. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, we know you're a big fan of Slack, so thanks for the feedback on that. So before we get into internal communications and just how exciting your business is in this interesting time, what is CookIt? How would you define it for us?
Well, CookIt was launched in 2014. We were the first meal kit company that launched in Canada. So back then, it was a very big innovation in the food segment, which had not innovated in many, many years. So our goal was to really bring the customer at the center of the decision. So what do you want to eat? And then we'll do all the procurement. We'll do all the research, search and development with our culinary team, with our nutritionists, and with our procurement team. And we'll deliver it right to your doorstep. So for those of you who don't know what it is, a meal kit company. Meal kits are basically you order the recipes and then you have all the ingredients pre-portioned with a recipe card, and you only have to do the fun part of it. So the cooking and placing a meal on the table. But a lot has changed in CookIt in the last couple of years. We've innovated, we've launched new products. So now we're as well a ready-to-eat meal company. And we also offer to some Quebec producers the availability to sell their products. So it's a platform that is only for the producers of Quebec, and people can add some specialty products to their boxes that include breakfast options, dinner options, and things like that.
So when I think, competition, I think, HelloFresh, I think somewhere in those, but I have a funny feeling your competition is much deeper than that. I mean, I guess to a certain degree, you're competing with a grocery store. You're competing with certainly during COVID, an activity, a family activity.
Absolutely. Well, we're competing in the food segment, so we call it the share of stomach. So we're competing against Uber, I actually see my competitors like HelloFresh and Good Food as enablers for us to move the dynamic of the market. When we launched CookIt, it was in 2014, and at that moment, there was less than 2% of the dollars spent online that were spent online toward against 98%, up until it took us 5 or 6 years. And Metro launched big initiatives, my competitors. So a lot of dollars were spent in that industry, and still it was only 5 or 6% before the pandemic. And then the pandemic came and accelerated completely and changed the way that consumers consume now. And that, I think that dynamic changed forever. And the latest numbers that we've seen in Canada is more around 16-22%, depending on the study, of dollars that are spent online. So it is a very competitive market. Absolutely. It's the highest expense of families as well is in food. So that's why, but and the market here in Canada is still very less competitive than when you take a look at the US market, which is crazy competitive. Here we're a couple of players, and yeah.
So let's take a step back and ask the ultimate question: why? Why start this business? What inspired you? What niche did you feel you were filling? Why did you wake up one day and go, this is where we need to be?
Well, when I was younger, at 15 years old, my mother sold everything she had in life and she became an entrepreneur, and she bought a campground. It was her passion. So we moved to Kinner's Mills right next to Thetford Mines.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped her build that business every summer for 3 or 4 years, flipping burgers, taking care of the pool, selling candies to kids. So I kind of learned what was an entrepreneur back then, and then came back to Montreal, finished my studies, and I was working in the hotel and restaurant area, and did my bachelor's degree in business. And at that point, I started to help many entrepreneurs launch their business. I was just curious that way and loved the new challenge. So I helped actually 3 different friends open businesses, one in Ghana and North Africa, where I lived for like 9 months, and then e-commerce based company and brick and mortar based company in Chabanel. So that kind of is where is my entrepreneurship spirits come from. And then at one point I was like, well, maybe it's not my avenue. Maybe I should get a more traditional job, work a 9 to 5. It's less stress. It's more stable. My mom, who had lived the entrepreneur journey, thought it was a great idea for me to have a job where I had a syndicat and where I had, which is absolutely not my persona. And so that's the avenue that I took. And one day I got up and was completely depressed about my 9 to 5 job, completely depressed. And then kind of started on a frenzy of writing business plan and trying to find my own $1 million idea. And the one thing that was the same is that I was working like 24/7, but when I was hungry, I had to stop everything and had to search the web for like 1 hour, 2 hours to find exactly what I wanted. Because what I wanted to eat, I had traveled the world. I had worked in the best restaurants, so I knew how to eat well. I just didn't know how to cook it. That was my main concern. So it would take 2 hours, cost me $75 per meal. And it was really wasteful as a journey. And at one point I said, well, I'm sure there is a better way to consume food to solve my problem, that at every day I have to stop everything that I'm doing to focus on my next meal. And then that's when like I had that kind of haha moment, and started to do some research, saw that there was nothing here online in Canada, saw that in Europe, it was not the same dynamic of market, and got inspired by what happened in Europe, but it was all brick and mortar at that time. So I decided to launch something in e-commerce, even if I was not an expert in e-commerce at that moment, but I figured that I would learn along the way. So yeah, that's the reason why.
Judith, of course, obviously during the pandemic, your business, took off, and it's been such an interesting time for new online businesses. But it's also a very crowded space. We were mentioning earlier there are a lot of prominent businesses in that space here in Montreal. How do you distinguish yourselves, both in terms of your product and in terms of just the space online, and the limited space to market anything online these days?
Very good question. And I just want to clarify something. Since our launch in 2014, we were able to triple cookie size every year. And it was a mix of investment in marketing, which is really my passion, and acquisition as well. So we did 2 acquisition with the acquisition of Cuisto and Miss Fresh, who helped us build Cook It. But yes, it's like I've said, in direct consumers, we have competitors. We have 2 direct competitors. One thing that we've done is that we focus very locally. So we've built our goal was we have less money than all of those competitors, a lot less money. So let's try to be as close to our consumers. Let's be as close to really build like kind of that fortress here. So Cookit was born on social media. And that's one thing that I really love, is that you can talk and reach customers that way. And at one point, we realized that the way we're gonna win, and I want to say it in like guillemets, is that if every box is the best that it can be against anything else, then that's how we'll win. And I think that's one thing that paid off very much for us. There's sondage that came out by Léger Marketing in 2 months ago that ranked Cookit as the 5th best player in online experience in e-commerce in Canada. That's before players than Amazon. It's before players like SAQ, and it's way before any other food competitors. So I've had problems explaining what was customer experience previously, but when we looked at Léger, and it was very clear, it's 22 different factors on how consumers rate their experience with a brand, starting with online advertising, the website, the image de marque, the experience that you have on social media, the experience that you have with customer service, the box by itself, so everything like that, the consumer, when they're trying to make a decision, and enlightening the decision, even if there's big players, like you can find anyone here now on the internet, and the consumers are smarter than we think, and they actually measure those things. So I think a lot of our success has come from building that fortress in Quebec, being closer to consumers, being present on social media, on influencers, our affiliate program, which I think is the best in Quebec. And for those who don't know what is an affiliate program, is that we have an affiliate program where we have ambassadors who become broadcasters of Cookit, and they are they have high audiences on social media, and that helps us build brand awareness for the brand. So I think it's a mix of that marketing, of proximity, of customer experience, and focused on the marketing that has helped us a lot build our customer base here in Quebec.
So we'll maybe touch on a little more delicate subject, and this is, I think, a lot of the online acquisitions during COVID, and whether that is food products or whether that is an ongoing consumer product, has been packaging. A lot of packaging goes into the food packaging. I mean, funny enough, my wife ordered something the other day that was about the size of a shoebox, and it came in a box big enough to put a calf in. So, you know, there's been a lot of complaints about the packaging. How do you see this, and do you see this as a way to possibly differentiate yourself in how you proceed to continue to move forward in this business?
It's a very good question. You know, I always keep referring to the beginning of Cookit in 2014. Back then, at that moment, 2015 and 2016, I call it kind of like the black period for the meal kit, because it's been kind of demonized at that moment for those 2 years. What we knew in the business, being a subscriber with Cookit, helps you reduce your food waste. So here in Canada, 30% of the food that has been produced, either perishable or non-perishable, goes to waste. It's either in your fridge, it's in the traditional model of procurement of food, so in grocery stores or things like that. 30% is huge. And I've been to a Metro store lately, and my mushrooms were coming in packaging and things like that, and my sour cream has been coming in packaging as well. Unfortunately, there's no we cannot displace it by air yet. So at that moment, 2015, 2016, we knew that we were kind of solving food waste, which was a huge problem, but we're too shy to say it because all of those fingers being pointed at us saying that we had a food packaging problem. And don't get me wrong, we do have a food packaging problem. We do have an e-commerce packaging problem, just a way of to buy things on internet. So in 2018, we launched the first Kit Durable, which was a completely 100% sustainable box, which we created in a closed circuit. So we would send the food by kits delivered to our doorsteps of the customers. Then they would replace the Tupperware's bag in the bag, and the next week we would pick up it over. And at that point, we thought that we had completely found a solution. But the funny thing enough is that the consumers were not ready. They wanted it. You saw that preoccupation online, but it was offered at the same in the same conversion flow on our website, and most of the consumers, and when I say most, I want to say 99% of our consumers still chose the normal kit. And that has to do with innovation and change. It's okay to change, but there can be so many changes at the same time. But that journey showed us that we can do some innovations in that. And we've decided to hire a lead packaging and invest $300,000 in innovation to find a solution in the next year. But I have to be honest, we haven't found a solution that is scalable, that is good for all of the parties yet, but we do want to work on it. And excellent question. It could be a huge differentiator towards our other competitors, either in our segment or even in all food segments.
So the last question I have is as we come out of COVID, what do you think the momentum is going to be? Where do you see yourself gaining? I mean, people are going to hopefully go back to restaurants. People are going to go back to some routine. Where do you find yourself fitting in, and where do you think the greatest momentum for your business is going to come from?
Mm-hmm. I think that change of consumer trends for online purchasing will stay pretty much the same. I don't see, like, if you didn't buy jeans before the pandemic, online during the pandemic, you certainly learned how to do that. And I think that once you change, you can hardly go back. So that's that. So for us, it's a great movement for us. Hopefully, I can't wait to go back to restaurants and eating with friends. But if you would have asked me the question 18 months ago, Judith, do you think if there's a pandemic and all the people on the planet have all the time at home with their hands and free, and the only thing that's available for them to do is do grocery and come back home, do you think they'll use a meal kit? I would have been very skeptic at that moment, because for me, how I saw cooking was like as a time saver. You have all those many different things that you want to do in life, and you're always so busy that you don't really have time to do that grocery. And that's kind of our segment and what we were kind of selling to the consumers. But eventually, so I can hardly predict the future. I know that we'll invest more in marketing, that we'll invest more in different products, that will penetrate different markets. That I know for sure. But where the consumers will be in 18 months, I don't know. And I think that's one of the strengths at Cookit is that we listen a lot to our consumers and to media and to all of the people that so we'll keep innovating to be the best fit for our customers.
Judith Fetzer from Cookit will have her one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur coming up in a few minutes. Love the passion and the adaptability and the attention to detail. So her advice on the way. Let's chat with Patrick Sullivan, trustee at FL, about maintaining a good relationship with your bank. Welcome back, Patrick.
Dan, Mike, always a pleasure.
The great thing about Canadian banks is that they've been pretty cooperative this year, I have to say. I'm not sure if it was a nudging by the federal government or just out of the kindness of their own hearts, but maintaining those relationships is something the banks seem to want to do as well.
Well, I'd like to say that, yes, the banks have been very tolerant indeed because of all the government subsidies that were just poured in. How do you maintain a good relationship with your bank? It's fairly easy. And we've been saying this for a long, long time. Communication is the key. Don't hide anything from your banker. Be open. because they look at numbers. Okay, in many cases they know somewhat about your business, but not necessarily all the ins and outs of your business. During this pandemic, which is over 12 months now, I mean, a lot of these relationships have tightened up. The bankers are looking down on their clients because the clients have been asking either to increase their lines of credits to support their problems during the pandemic. And obviously this brings to, the ratios get out of whack. They need more money, but the assets are not necessarily there to support the increase in the line of credit. People are working at distance. It's harder to get the information. It's harder to get the cash flows. So what has come out of this is many bankers have now gone to phase 2, which is basically, we're going to reopen your credit agreement and we're going to modify certain things in there to allow you to go through this, call it pandemic. And in doing so, what they've created, and this existed even before the pandemic, they will refer back and create what is called a forbearance agreement, where basically what that entails is that they will allow you to not respect your ratios. They will allow increased lines of credit. They will, identify in the forbearance agreement the number of defaults that you have come across in your original financing agreement, outline them. And then what happens is they will also give you a delay. They'll give you a specific time frame in order to, recapture, readjust, and come back to your regular credit terms. Originally, if we go before the pandemic, normally these forbearance agreements would run maybe 2 months, 3 months. Now I've seen them go as far as 18 months. So that it goes to tell you that, the bankers are very, very tolerant right now. And there's the reputational risk, obviously, that they don't want to be faced with in pulling the plug on everybody.
Part of the problem, though, I think is, and you touched on it earlier, is the relationship management with the bank. And I think a lot of people have learned or have taken the approach with their bankers to look at it and go, well, I'm going to beg for forgiveness as opposed to ask for permission. Where do you see, Pat, the relationship and coming to terms with your discussion with the banker? Is it after the fact, kind of throwing a Hail Mary, or is this something you should be working on with the bank as you're going through it?
You know what? Again, the key is that you have to stay in touch. You have to give the information as much as you can, not hide anything, because when the bankers find out that you're hiding or you're holding back some information, then the reaction is going to be totally different. They're no longer going to be there to support you. They're going to be there to make sure that they recover their marbles, and eventually they may put you out of business. So it's always a question of, I trust my banker that, he's going to help me. And it's been going very well in that sense, because we see that a lot of files that normally, trustee work is down considerably in the last 18 months, I would say. And that's because the bankers are being very, very easy on their customers to help them go through this pandemic.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is being easy on them is I'm not sure is always by choice. It may be by necessity at the end of the day, just in order to help everybody get through this environment. But the one thing we are seeing after pretty much 10 years of a bull market, both in the stock market, low, almost non-existent interest rates, all of a sudden the bankers are really starting to tighten up their credit facilities and their relationships. And where you used to say, yeah, I'll get you the statements when I get them to you, the T's need to be crossed and the I's are needing to be dotted. And I'm sure, Pat, you're seeing a lot more compliance today.
Definitely a lot more compliance. Definitely bankers are going to be tightening up even more, because as we get out of all these subsidies, obviously they're going to start to relook at their portfolios. They're going to be coming down on certain clients that have not respected the new conditions that they've put together. Bear in mind, the interest rates are still low, but when you enter into what is called a forbearance agreement, all of a sudden there's a price to pay for that too. Your banker is going to increase your interest rates, and there's going to be fees charged to you because all of this is done through their legal departments. So there's an add-on to being, in a forbearance agreement, that there's a cost.
Patrick Sullivan, trustee at FL. Thanks so much, Patrick.
Always a pleasure.
And now let's turn to Judith, the head and founder of Cook It. And Judith Fetzer, your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur, please.
My one piece of advice, I think I want to address that to all the women in the world. It's really to dream big. I think it's my mission in life in the entrepreneur world is really to encourage women to dream bigger. So you can see if you can dream it, you can do it. You just have to start small, but never give up.
Judith Fetzer, thanks so much for joining us today on Today's Entrepreneur.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Mike. And don't forget, for all the episodes for Today's Entrepreneur for the last, 12 years now, go to today'sentrepreneur.org. You can also subscribe on iTunes, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. And we'll see you then. Bye.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.